This, actually, infinite intelligence is an amazing gift to humanity that just popped in there from nowhere. If we hadn't found this one manuscript, it was actually found by Valna II, shortly after Baba dropped the body in '69. Judy is stealthily sneaking out here. We would have no idea that anything like this existed at all. And I take this to be really the direct write-up of a dictation Baba gave. So this is the talk. And it's a most extraordinary exposition Baba gave. I think about infinite intelligence, actually, that I would be very surprised if the Mandali of that time would have been able to assimilate it. I'm sure there were some at the time who would have understood it when Baba was giving it. Somehow in my mind, I somehow picture Baba discoursing on things like that, and when you would see him explain it, somehow you would understand it, even if it was something that would ordinarily be out of your ken or beyond your understanding. But I think, I somehow feel sure that when you saw Baba explain it, you know what he's talking about. But probably an hour later, you couldn't reproduce one single word of it. And I think that probably was the case with a lot of the Mandali. There might have been a few of the Dr. Ghanis and the Ranjus, say, and maybe others, maybe Padri. I think Padri actually had a good mind for these things, or Adi, who would have understood a lot of it. But I'd be very surprised if any of them would have retained any of it a year later, because there was no occasion for them to be reviewing it. So it looks to me like this is something Baba gave, and it completely disappeared from the picture. Nobody I ever heard ever referred to it. I never heard Adi talk about it, or Padri, or Pindu. Pindu never liked this kind of thing. And the women that was in their own sphere at that time. And yet, lo and behold, after 60 years, 70 years, it suddenly reappears. And it's related to God Speaks, I guess you could say. It's high philosophy, but it gives a completely new take on things. It's like looking at reality through a completely new window, rather different from what God Speaks gives. And it's a big addition to the big picture of the game.
Timing.
Yeah. So it really wasn't the time yet. Even in when Baba gave it doesn't seem to have had any repercussions that ever could have. It's not until, 2005 when it got published that this really entered into the public discourse. But it's a major, major part of the picture. Actually, this being the central to the work that I've been doing the last 20 years. In the 1920s, it's as if Baba gave a whole dispensation. The different bodies of material we're working with are rather different from each other. Like infinite intelligence is really like nothing else. There's nothing else to compare with it. These Tiffin Lectures we're going to be publishing this year is talks to the Mandali. It's like the spiritual training of the Mandali. The next project will be to the Meher Ashram boys, which is a world of its own, I'll tell you. And there's a whole other mass of material. All of this before Baba went to the West in 1931. And when he went to the West, everything changed. And all this earlier material, it's like it got closed in a vault and never got looked at for another 70 years. And Baba changed his mode of giving discourses radically after the Westerners appeared in the picture. And that earlier stuff would really have just mystified them. It really wasn't for them. And it wasn't really for Baba's global presentation of his message either. You know, when Baba went to the West, I don't mean this in a disparaging way that it will sound, but in a way he really dumbed everything down. He made it real simple and real basic, and yet really deep. True. Those early messages of his, man, they are magnificent. But they don't presuppose any spiritual knowledge. They're just talking about things that everybody could understand and affirming the divine truths behind them all, so that anybody could get it. But all the esoteric stuff, Baba left that behind in Meherabad in a vault for 70 years. And it doesn't come out. In 1997, Eric says to Meherwan, go ahead with it. And then it starts to come to view first.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It just makes so much sense.
It's premature. I think the world and I think the Baba community is at a point now where we can understand, even infinite intelligence. I think we can understand these things. But I don't think the world was ready for it before. But then Baba made it real basic, very deep. He just gave a few messages in 1932. This book, Early Messages to the West, collects them, actually. And they're just 6 or 7, they're short. Like his message to Hollywood, 2 messages to Hollywood. Those are really fantastic, actually, even though they're so simple. And then in the Discourses, where he had a bunch of his Westerners living here at Bangalore and Meherabad, they started up the MeherBaba Journal. And he had the Westerners and Easterners collaborating on the MeherBaba Journal. And then Baba began to give his explanations again in the form of the Discourses. And those are a wonderfully, exquisitely integrated blend of West and East. They don't put down anybody. They're not, saying you Westerners are just a bunch of materialistic pigs. Bow at the feet of the Indians who you colonially oppressed for 200 years. No, there's none of that with him at all. Didn't put down the West. Didn't put down the East. It was really quite embracing of the whole picture. And he speaks really well to everybody. And there's not a bunch of metaphysical, spiritualistic claptrap.
Good.
He introduces some concepts like the law of karma. Okay, you gotta understand that. He explains sanskaras, and that was rather new. There's very little about sanskaras in earlier Indian literature. You won't even, the word is there, but there's not much talk about it. Even in Buddhism, just a little bit, even in Vedanta. Reincarnation, so there's a little bit of spiritual knowledge, terminology, but there's not enough to be intimidating, and he explains it all, And, I've been studying last year in Discourses and read them closely even more than before. That in certain portions of Discourses, Baba is explicitly addressing one of the really critical themes in Advaita Vedanta. Would you have known that? But he does.
He did what to them?
Like, I'm just giving one example. Advaita Vedanta.
Yeah.
Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is, I rank that the greatest philosophical tradition in the world. I don't think there's anything, even Sufism doesn't equal it, so as far as explaining the truth goes. That's because the great master Shankaracharya was himself a minor incarnation of the avatar, Baba. And he's the great founder of Advaita Vedanta. But there are certain things in the Discourses, and I was just reading and saying, this is exactly what Shankara was saying. And you would read through it, and it would just say, oh, yeah, that's right, I get that, and not have any idea the depth of the issue that underlies it. The Discourses are full of this stuff. They're quite amazing. They get more amazing. When I think of most of what I read, I was 18 when I came to Baba, okay? The stuff that I was reading when I was 18 there were wow experiences at the time. Well, I look at them now and I think, it's pretty thin stuff, most of it. I mean, I'm not I mean, most worldly people are just shallow. That's how we are, we worldly folk, and they gave their best. Baba's discourses are not like that at all. After 45 years, they continue to amaze me. Every time I read them, it's like, have I ever read this darn discourse before? It's like, how did I never see this before? So that's because there's an infinite, this common sense language, this very reasonable discourse, these commonsensical explanations, there's an infinite depth behind them. You have to grow into it, you have to live your way into it. But this was the fruit of Baba's integrating the Western. Infinite intelligence explains that in a way that nothing else does, in that it makes it clear that this entire creation is nothing but the imagination.
Nothing, right.
And it doesn't exist at all.
Right.
When you're in it, you're threading your way, and there's the law of karma, and there's the law of impressions and all of that. But actually, it doesn't even exist. What really exists is me, the real self.
Yeah.
And the real self in each one of us, which is actually the same one self. You know, we're looking out at each other through different pairs of eyes, but it's actually the same one self that's looking out through every different pair of eyes. And at the end, you realize, I am. And that's all that's ever been there. And this whole has been a vast play of the imagination. That's all it's ever been. It never existed at all. I think infinite intelligence explains that. In a way that nothing else does. Even God Speaks doesn't explain the imagination. The spiritual life is dangerous. I mean, you have to take risks. And that is true even in what may seem to be a very ordinary and boring lifetime. It's actually not. There's a quality of living in the immediate presence of God. And every moment you have to have the daring to do that. Papa says that a lot. Love is no game for the faint.
Faint of heart.
Faint of heart.
Yeah.
It's to really live the life for God. It's like jumping off a cliff at every moment. Really. You only see that life truly lived in the life of the great ones, you know, the Ramakrishnas, or the new life. The new life, they had to do that. They were all forced to do that, actually. Infinite intelligence is really a unified exposition, like God Speaks, you might say. And Tiffin Lectures is not. It's a whole series of disparate talks Baba gave.
And what period is the Tiffin Lectures?
It's they're all dated. The first is the end, I think, April 30th, 1926, or maybe April 29th. And the last of them is August 30th, 1927. So they run over about 16 months, from April 26 to August 27. And this was the early MeherBabaLibrary period. Baba first settled into MeherBabaLibrary, full-time residence, in January 1925. And that began what is called the first long stay. Baba stayed there from January 25 until November 26. And it was jam-packed with things happening. That's when Baba opened the...
From 25 until 26.
November. Yeah. That was the first long stay.
Oh, the first long stay, okay.
And then he ended that. He looked like he was closing down the ashram and leaving. He shut down all the institutions and everything. But then he came back a month later. You know how Baba did this. And he started everything up again. But then this was really focused on the school for boys, the Meher Ashram school. But I was talking about the Tiffin Lectures.
Yes,
These there's something quite different from Infinite Intelligence, which is really a concentrated treatise, you might say. Baba gave a concentrated exposition on a subject that he wanted to explain. And it was at exactly the same time as Tiffin Lectures, actually. At least the beginning of them, the Tiffin Lectures.
Wait, you said Tiffin Lectures is concentrated, or what?
No, Infinite Intelligence.
Oh, Infinite Intelligence
is a concentrated exposition exposition on a deep subject that Baba wanted to explain. And I think he probably did this over about 3 months or so. But at the very same
some of that might be from his book.
You know, I don't see any way of knowing. I just don't see. Baba was writing the book at the same time. He began the book right after he began his silence in 25, and he continued until November of 20 or December of 26.
November.
So this was right. Infinite Intelligence was dictated at that time, and the Tiffin Lectures, the first 2/3 of them, were in that period too. So it's this early
But
period.
infinite intelligence was dictated?
That's my opinion, yeah. Between about March, April, and June, July 1926.
That would not be the same as written. I would read the book myself.
No, so I don't think that Infinite Intelligence is the book.
Wow. Dictated to whom? And it took 70 years for us to be ready for that. To be ready for the book.
And this is all based on, I mean, I'd have to spend, give
Like
a long talk
his early
on this
followers, the
subject.
closest ones.
Probably Chanji wrote it up. There's a reference in the combined diary to Baba dictating something like this, and Chanji recording it. That's what I think it is. So, Infinite Intelligence would have been that middle months of 1926, and that's when he began giving his talks that were collected by Chanji into what is called the Tiffin Lectures. The reason it got that title is the manuscript we have bears that title on it. Thursday Tiffin Lectures, it's called. And Tiffin means lunch. And Thursday is Guruvar, Guru's Day.
Right.
So it would be conventional on Thursday to show your respects to a guru. So Baba would come on Thursdays up to the family quarters. You know where that was? It's right near where the dispensary is now.
I'm a little confused because I don't know anything at all about the Tiffin Lectures. And you're saying that we got the title because was it a book? Was it a notebook? Was it a diary? What was it, this manuscript that you're looking at?
Well, the final draft of it
That you think
have,
was written by Chanji?
Yes, that's without any serious doubt.
You're looking at handwriting.
No, it's typed, but we have earlier drafts in Chanji's diaries that are drafts that led to the typed version. The published book is going to give all this information in great detail. So Baba would on Thursdays come up to Kaka Shahani's house, which is the family quarters, which is right where the dispensary is, you know, the edge of Erangel, you know, the dispensary there. That was where the family quarters was. And Kaka Shahani was one of Baba's disciples. And Baba would hold forth on various topics. But actually, Baba was giving these talks to the Mandali on other days also. And a lot of them were given on MeherBabaLibrary property. So Thursday Tiffin Lectures is the title that the manuscript bears. But actually Baba was talking a lot. In fact, during this period, especially April, May, June of 1926, Baba was giving discourses to the Mandali as he never had done before and as he never did after.
The men,
The men.
not the women.
They were completely separate. So
Would
he
you
was...
like something? Would you like some food or something while you're talking?
It's in the refrigerator, my crew.
Or some rice or something?
Grapes and
Would be good, yeah. So Baba was really focused on this. It seems like this was at the center of his focus at that time. And you could really say that Thursday Tiffin Lectures is like the spiritual training of the Mandali. At least the spiritual education of the Mandali.
So it was only Thursday, once a week, only.
Well, that's what got featured on the title of the manuscript. But Baba was actually giving talks other days at MeherBabaLibrary. In those days, a lot of MeherBabaLibrary buildings were located between the highway and the railway tracks. You know that strip of land there? There are a whole bunch of buildings there in those days. The Side Arbor, the Mechanic House, the Hazrat Babajan School building, the post office was there. All of those buildings were there. So he gave a bunch of these talks there. And it was, the Tiffin Lectures are a lot more approachable and readable than Infinite Intelligence. Infinite Intelligence is very difficult and forbidding, I would say. But the Tiffin Lectures aren't that way at all. So it's whatever he wanted them to understand that he talked to them about. The topic comes up because this year I'm doing a whole bunch of seminars on State of God. The most extended of these is at Meherana in September, which is 9 days. It's morning, afternoon for 9 days. So we'll really have the chance to go into it in a lot of depth. And it can sustain that kind of study. It really can. By Francis Brabazon. And it was written by him in response to a direct order from Baba. He and Don Stevens came to the 1955 Sahabas here at Meherabad with the 4 language groups. It was almost all only for Indians. There's a Hindi, Marathi, Telugu, Gujarati groups for 1 week each. But Francis and Don were allowed to come. And at the end of that, Baba told Don to write the book that came out as Listen Humanity, which most of you would know that came about as from Baba's order then. And Baba told Francis to write a book, and he gave him the title Stay with God. But at the time, Francis had no idea what kind of book it would be. But eventually it turned out to be a kind of an epic, poetic epic. And after Baba visited Australia the second time in 1958, it became clear that Francis was going to be invited back to live with Baba for a long stay with Baba. You know, after 1938, as far as I know, Francis Brabazon is the only Westerner who came to live with Baba as a resident Mandali. Donkin was the previous one, and over that 30 years period, there was only one Westerner who became a resident Mandali, and that was Francis Brabazon. And when he came to, he left Australia, I think December 30th, 31st of 1958, and he brought with him the manuscript of Stay with God, and read it out to Baba, I think maybe 3 times. And Baba really involved himself in it. Baba had a lot of suggestions and input and corrections. Francis wrote in a letter that what he took to be the highest praise from Baba about the book was, Baba said, it will appeal to the highest intellects and the simplest of hearts. Isn't that nice? And it does. It's very moving. When you understand it, it's very, very moving. And I don't think there's been any presentation of Meher Baba that compares with it. And I don't imagine there will be for maybe hundreds of years.
Is it available now in the bookstores here?
I haven't looked. I would think it would be.
I think it is in print.
Yeah. That's definitely in print. Whether they have it in the local bookstores, I haven't looked to see. So it's there's a lot to be said about it. I hope there's a lot to be said about it, because it's signed on for 9 days in Meherana, 3 days at the center. It's beautiful poetry on top of everything else.
The highest, it will appeal to the highest of intellects.
And the simplest hearts. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. It is. It's very moving. Some parts of it it's so passionately felt. It presents Baba as he's never been presented before. I mean, but Francis wrote that right after Baba had declared himself to be the avatar of the age. So you might say it's a presentation to all posterity of who the avatar is.
What year?
It was published in 1959, and he wrote it between 55 and 59. And it also, I think part of the reason for the importance of it is that Francis really takes on modern civilization. He's very critical of modern civilization. It's like bitterly caustic to a lot of it. And he takes on a lot of the world of art, the whole history of art. I don't know. He knew the term an autodidact. That's somebody who taught himself. He was a farmer's son and only got educated up to 7th grade, maybe. And was dirt poor. I mean, he was in the Depression years in Australia. He had no money at all. But somehow or another, he acquired an astonishing knowledge, not just of the West, but of the East also. It's for someone living in southern Australia in those days, it's quite an amazing accomplishment, actually. And he really takes it on how civilization has not stayed with God, how it's drifted away and departed from God, and he's very penetrating in what he has to say about that and how that's happened. And so I think its day is coming now. I think we're entering into a phase. This is part of why I just thought I've always liked Stay with God, but last year I thought we should really start to go into this, because I think the Baba world is entering into a phase where this will become more directly relevant. We've been living in the age of the mandala until now. It seems that way to me, in the sense that these great souls and these great shining beacons have kind of spread the menu for us, you might say. I don't mean for absolutely everybody, but by and large, they gave a guidance to an intimacy with Baba, a familiarity with Baba, to be natural and close to Baba, and just to partake of his humanity. All that was made so simple and natural by Mandali. They're gone now. That age is finished. And I think that, I hope that intimacy with Baba will not be finished. But in the time we're coming into, I think a lot of questions are going to come up, like somebody wants to do, all right, I'm just inventing, somebody wants to do a Mozart concert in the theater here. Do we do that at MeherBabaLibrary? Or a Shakespeare play, or a Shakespeare play that Mera liked, in other words, you're going to be, I'm just giving this as one example, there'll be all sorts of questions. There's a whole vast civilization out there. How do we respond to it exactly? What do we absorb? What do we reject? This is, the followers of the avatar of the age. Every avataric advent has to do this. At first, it's the family of those intimately associated with the Divine Beloved, right? As time goes on, it has to engage the world it's in. It has to. You can't not do that. So how do we respond to that? What do we absorb? What becomes part of... Okay, in early Christianity, after about 150, 200 years, the Christians were getting criticized by other people around the Mediterranean, saying, this Christ of yours, he's philosophically stupid. They didn't quite say it that way, but you're so unsophisticated. What do you say about Plato and Aristotle? Okay. So some of them read those Plato in those days and were able to articulate a Christian vision that was more philosophically informed, that had an idea of who God was and all this sort of thing. And that gradually got absorbed and is part of the Christian worldview now. Thomas Aquinas is full of Aristotle. Like that. So that's something that got absorbed. I'm just giving that as one example I mean, parts of it were absorbed, other parts of it were said, no, this we don't want. This we accept, that we don't accept. So we've got a world we're in. How are we going to respond to it? You know? And I think Francis Brabazon's Stay with God gives more guidance on that than anything else we have. He can be really critical. He can be savage. And he's very opinionated. And I don't think you have to accept every opinion that he has to give. But what he has is a penetrating insight to the central question: how do we stay with God? That was the theme Baba gave him. So I think really its importance is going to be felt more and more starting now. Because now we're going to be forced to deal with the world and the civilization that we live in more than we ever have before. You've been kind of protected until now, the Baba world. The world has not been interested in Meher Baba. And if we go off and play our little games with Meher Baba, the world has, for the most part, left us alone. But I don't think it's going to remain that way. And we're going to have to deal with the civilization in which we exist. And we're going to have what the world says this. Is this, do we consider this to be our values or don't we? What do we accept and what don't we accept? You know, all those questions. And that's where I think Francis Brabazon is really going to be a help. So I think his hour is really something.
S-T-A-Y, Stay with God.
Stay with God, yeah. The very last 2 pages, he starts repeating that phrase, and it is so powerful. He was inspired when he wrote that thing. I think he got it straight from Baba. Baba even would say, this is my book. Baba really, really praised it. He said there's never been such a thing done before.
More than Listen Humanity.
Well, Listen Humanity is a completely different kettle of fish because it has a whole bunch of Baba's own discourses in it. So, I mean, Baba's own words are in their own category.
Right.
But, you know, Lord Meher has a very complex textual history. Originally, Baba, the order that Baba gave to Bao was to write a poem, which was published, in fact, a Hindi poem, Meher Darshan. And preparatory to that, Bao wrote Baba's a prose version of it, Meher Prabhu. And that was in Hindi. The Meher Darshan, the poem, it's in print still. It's not thick. Is in Hindi too. And in the 1970s, after he had completed his Hindi text, it got translated into English. And then Hermes published it as Lord Meher, and that was the first English version. I think it was considerably expanded by Bao or maybe David or Hermes. David would really be the one who could explain all of this. I mean, new material was found and added in. And when I was working for Bao, that process was still happening. And there would be new volumes Hermes would send to Bao for checking and everything. And so the first edition of it got printed between, 1983 maybe, I can't remember, in 1999 or 2001, something like that, over about a 15, 18-year period. That was the first edition of Lord Meher, which is, again, it's an English translation and I think an expansion on the original Hindi.
I have to plug in, I'm sorry.
Yeah. We're running out of power.
Yeah.
The dates are given on Lord Meher itself. And so that was the first complete English edition. But then David...
15 to 18-year period it was published.
Yeah.
It was published.
Yeah. I don't think the Hindi has yet been published, the original text from which that was created. But the English, I think, is much... the last volume of Lord Meher, there's a note that talks about this, but I think it's considerably expanded. The English version is considerably expanded as new material became available and so forth. And then, but then David Fenster has been working on that, correcting it. I mean, there are a lot of mistakes in it, naturally, work of that scale done in that time frame. So he's been checking and correcting and adding new information. And it got published in an Indian edition, 2006 or 7, something like that, which is somewhat revised. It's not identical to the original edition, but some of David's corrections have been incorporated. And I think David is planning to come out with another comprehensive edition when he's finished that will contain all the corrected versions, the corrections of it. So part of what is happening, one of the things that the Avatar MeherBaba Trust is undertaking under the publication committee now is with works like of this sort, to make the source materials available online. So the aim would be to make the various editions and source materials for Lord Meher, which is a trust copyright, make it available through the trust website. Now, in a different, well, it's a different story in a way, but the same basic thing is being done with Tiffin Lectures, because Tiffin Lectures is Baba's own words. And I could say a lot more about this. I gave a talk at the Legacy program on the subject 2 months ago, but a month and a half ago. But we call this Baba's unpublished indirect words. There's a clause in Baba's last will and testament. Do you know about Baba's last will and testament? No. He has one. 1967, and he says, I own the copyrights in all my literary works. This isn't word for word, but it's copyrights in all my literary works, published and unpublished, direct and indirect. And then he gives a big long list of the kinds of things that he means. So we're taking Tiffin Lectures to be his unpublished and indirect words, because he never oversaw the publication of them or the editing of them. And we're presenting it with MeherBaba as the author, because they are based directly on his diaries. But they've been edited. You have to edit material like this. And he never oversaw or approved the editing. So that's being said right up front. And the trust policy now is in cases like this, when such a book is published, concurrently to release online all the source materials. Mm-hmm. So that would be the typed final versions, the various drafts of Chanji's diaries, all the stuff. So all that's going to go up online. And so what's happening with Lord Meher is similar idea. And actually, the book, Tiffin Lectures itself, gives all sorts of guidance into this about how you can find source materials and their endnotes. And this is really for, real hardcore textual studies buffs who want to say, MeherBaba said that, show me the source. Okay, fair question. Here it is.
Yeah.
In fact, it's sources. Sometimes you'll see layers, an original notes by Chanji in Gujarati, and then Chanji's further write-up, and then Chanji's further final version, and then this type version, and then that type version. All of that is there. It's all going to be online.
And speakers of MeherBaba can refer questioners to online.
Yeah.
They don't have to hold long conversations with many people explaining.
Yeah, and I'm sure literary scholars like me will have great fun with this in future centuries. Part of the trust policy is that in the future, if somebody says, this edition of Tiffin Lectures stinks, the editor's completely screwed it up, And if somebody does a better version, all right. What's really authoritative is the source material.
Yeah.
So that's the new trust policy with Baba's unpublished indirect literary works. So that's the category. I've written a lot on this kind of thing. Actually, at the very beginning of Tiffin Lectures, there's a page-and-a-half statement from Schroeder as chairman of the trust on MeherBaba's words that talks exactly about this. Because infinite intelligence would be another example of Baba's unpublished indirect words, because that too was never published in Baba's lifetime, and we don't have Baba's seal of approval on the way that it was edited.
Infinite intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, we could have screwed up. It perfectly well could be. And someone can very well raise the question. So when we publish Infinite Intelligence, there too, we put online the source manuscript. And there's a concordance on line 2 where you can go from page 227 and find out which page of the manuscript the source is, and then you can go back and read the manuscript and see for yourself.
Wow.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's been there from the very beginning. So you can check it.
Someone has to start with the original material and do the best job possible with his or her abilities and
Right.
not carry the burden of this is permanent and
Somebody does a better job, well and good.
It has to start.
Yeah. The thing is that if you read we call them the intelligence notebooks. They're the source material for Infinite Intelligence. Nobody would read that. It's impenetrable. It's in this kooky style. And I'm not criticizing them. It's a highly artificial style. No one ever wrote in such a style. It's an artificial style. And I'm personally quite convinced that the Mandali did this as a way of writing up the substance of what Baba had dictated that would be extremely accurate, but completely unreadable. In the understanding that somebody would rewrite it into edible, readable form one day. And you can certainly understand it. It's just the prose. I'd have to show you some of it. You'd see what I mean. It's nuts. Brackets and sentences that are that long and way beyond God speaks.
This brings a question. I have a question now as you're talking about this. So I respect what you're saying about the source material. That's very important. Then you get a book like Stay with God, and you get a book like Lord Meher, Parts of Lord Meher, that were not just taken from a source, they were taken from an inspiration. So what do you do with that when it comes from, the inspiration? You're saying stay with God. Baba said that's his work, and Lord Meher, we all know, Bao was given those instructions.
For Lord Meher, I would really have to leave it to the people who are working with it closely. I haven't had anything to do with it. But
what about inspiration, like in Stay with God? Where does that fit in with sourcing?
Well, Stay with God is really Francis's own creative work.
Okay.
And I don't think that should ever get tampered with at all. It's
validated by Baba. Validated by Baba.
Oh yeah, no, we have Baba's clear indication of its importance, so there should be no rewriting of that. Now, the trust policy regarding Baba's published words, that would be books like Discourses or God Speaks or Everything and the Nothing, like that. When those books were given by Baba and published with his name on them and with his approval.
Which books were them?
Well, we're talking like Discourses or God Speaks or Divine Theme would be another example of that. Or The Everything and the Nothing or Life at Its Best. Those are Baba's published words. Those we don't tinker with. The trust policy is that they can be edited in utterly minor ways. For example, if there's a spelling mistake, surely we don't have to go on reproducing a spelling mistake for 700 years. Or let's suppose in Discourses, the original edition says the table of types of meditation on page 158. You reflow the text and now it's on page 167. Do you have to go on and saying 158 for 700 years even though it's not there anymore? Things like that. In other words, you have to change, and that's it. Or else the outermost limit, like if there's a pronoun agreement problem, subject, verb, they don't agree with each other. A singular subject and a plural verb, okay, we'll correct that. That's as far as we go. Nothing else for Baba's published words. People can be rightly concerned. Well, are the words of the Avatar of the Age going to get rewritten? Are they going to get distorted? It's a very valid question. And the trust policy is, the things that Baba published in his lifetime, we leave them alone. With the things that Baba didn't publish in his own lifetime, those have to be edited. I could talk for hours about this, but the diaries we have aren't literally Baba's words. They're the notes somebody took,
Right.
And Baba wasn't giving something suitable for a book yet. He was giving an explanation in the understanding that somebody would take it and present it in suitable form. And, for example, a lot of Chanji's records of what Baba said. You don't do better than Chanji. He was Baba's secretary. He was an intimate disciple. He was utterly faithful to Baba. And yet still, he wasn't a particularly good writer. He was a good enough writer, but nothing great. So when I look at it, I say a lot of the vocabulary here is Chanji's. A lot of the writing here is Chanji's. Baba would make a gesture, and when you saw Baba make the gesture, you knew exactly what he meant. But the word that you would say to express it would depend on who the disciple was.
Right.
And it would use their vocabulary,
Right.
their linguistic abilities. A Dr. Ghani would be highly brilliant and articulate. Somebody else would be more limited. Mm-hmm. So it's not as though we have Baba's words literally.
Right.
We have some of the words would actually be dictated by Baba. That's true. But a lot of them aren't. It was Baba expressing. I'm just imagining this. I wish we had a really good account of it. But okay, so Baba's writing, chalk on slate or up with the board, and he does a little bit, looks up, and whoever's reading it finishes the sentence for Baba, right? I'm guessing that's what would happen, so that Baba wouldn't have to be bothered to write the whole thing out. And Baba would say, that's right, or no, correct, and then correction like this. And the person would be expressing what Baba was saying. Well, it's not like that's word for word what Baba said in any case. So it has to be taken and faithfully written up without changing the meaning at all. Baba specified that in a readable form. If it's terrible, awful prose, no one will want to read it. So anyway, that's part of it's a very hard job. So in doing this, we look at every source. Like if the same discourse was given, if Chanji has this draft and that draft and a Gujarati draft and an English draft, we look at all of it and then try to write a clear, readable statement of what the content of it was.
Do you read Gujarati or do you have a translator?
No, we've worked a lot with people who do, and a lot of the key words. Yeah. So the key words, we'll check. There'll be certain key words in a sentence. And so this is what is being published, and we're being completely upfront about what it is. And if anybody wants to say, your version is not good enough for me, I want to see the original sources. Wonderful. Mm-hmm. Here they are. Mm-hmm. And someday if someone does a better job, great.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the trust distinguishes between things whose publication Baba oversaw and the stuff that he didn't. And that's what we're working on now. So Tiffin Lectures and Infinite Intelligence. And there'll be more things from the 20s after this. What we've really tried to do is to stick very rigorously and faithfully to what Baba said, to the content of it, where we're not putting in our own ideas or our own interpretations or...
Different from the Bible.
Yeah. I mean, we're really trying to... Baba said this. There's an instruction from Baba. He said, "My discourses can be recomposed in stylish and forceful language, but the spirit and meaning should remain unchanged." That's almost word for word. "My discourses can be recomposed in stylish and forceful language, but the spirit and meaning should remain unchanged." So that's what we're trying to do. He said the same thing to Francis Brabazon and to
My
Don Stevens.
discourses can be changed,
Can be recomposed.
recomposed. Okay.
This is right in Infinite Intelligence, it's quoted. In stylish and forceful language.
Okay.
But the spirit and meaning should remain unchanged.
So that would be different from the Bible, which
Well,
is
the
not
Bible is his
word
notes.
for word. Jesus' words.
I mean, that's a whole big story in itself. So this is what we're
That's
doing.
in Infinite Intelligence?
In one of the supplements,
Okay.
it quotes from the combined diary. That's where this is. And it quotes it word for word. It can be found there.
Okay.
So that's what all of our editing does this. It has to be made readable. I mean, I'm not talking about Ciceronian prose. It doesn't have to be made into something, exquisitely eloquent and beautiful. Good, basic, clear, smoothly readable English prose that expresses exactly what Baba was saying. Nothing more, nothing less. That's what we're trying to do. For years, I had been working with Marwan Jaswala, but he really can't anymore. And now, we're at the very finishing stages of Tiffin Lectures, and the editing is long gone. It's the final stages of it.
Is Falu able to help you at all?
No, he's really tied up in his own work. But for the Gujarati, we've had plenty of help. Cyrus and Salmia Kambata and Rajnikant Mistry, do you know him? From Kishore Mistry's brother from Gujarat. They came for several weeks, and we worked from 9 in the morning until almost midnight. We put in 14-hour days.
Cyrus from Bombay or another Cyrus?
Yeah, from Bombay.
Oh, he is such a superb speaker.
Oh, yeah.
He is so clear and focused. I sought him out once to say.
Yeah, I know. We were working. They stayed. It was in March, actually.
He's so brilliantly simple.
March and April, maybe. And they stayed in the Pilgrim Center. We worked in the men's dormitory. We worked these long, long days translating.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
So the and then a lot of other people, Kushal Panchal, I don't know if you know him, guy and his dad, Uttam, they have a place here. They helped a lot.
How wonderful
No, it's
for them to
almost
be able to
2
do
minutes
that.
before closing, so
Yeah.
if there's anything else that you wanted to share with us, or last questions, or...
2 minutes.
Well, it's been wonderful.
So much. It's been,
I mean, I love this subject matter, and it's always fun to talk about it.
We love the whole thing, boy. Yeah. Wonderful.
But
Are you going to do study groups here?
I don't know if it. I don't know. But I do encourage people who feel drawn to reading and studying Baba's books. If you feel that, the one thing I would say is the treasure is there. Most of the world's offers buy this discount rate, and you wind up disappointed. That's not the case of Baba's books. The real treasure is there. Okay, well, Avatar.
Baba ki jai.
Thank you for
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Zara.